And I would like to introduce Scott Clary, International Marketing and Sales Expert, Director of Development and Grass Valley, right?
Yes, correct. You got it. Yes.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about selling to buying committee and this term multi-threading communication or sales. Yeah, you you
So
mentioned
you got, yeah, that's it. Do you want me to, take over? I could take
it.
over if you'd like. All right, let's go. So we're talking about multi-threading. So you've had a ton of great topics. Multi-threading really is just selling to the whole buying committee. That's the easiest way to put it. I'm going to speak about some tactics for doing it and then why it's important. So let me go ahead and share my screen because I want to walk through some ideas with you. Give me a quick second here. All right. So can
We can see.
everyone see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So multi-threading, so not a complicated concept, but it's an important one, right? So the process of building relationships with multiple individuals and stakeholders in your deal, also known as selling to the entire buying committee. Now, most people, when they do this, they're going to be thinking, for example, enterprise or larger deals where there's a lot of people involved, but you can also use multi-threading just to increase your win rate or to increase the likelihood that you're going to close deals in smaller or mid-market. Now, obviously, the thing with multi-threading is that you have to figure out the investment of time in figuring out how many people are going to be involved in that buying committee and reaching out to them and communicating with them and bringing them all on demos and whatnot. But Gardner, basically a report that Gardner put out in 2020, there are roughly 6 to 10 influencers in the buying committee. So if you've sold in a B2B environment, you know that there is the decision maker, but there's also the decision influencers, the other stakeholders that have a major impact on the product that you are selling. And this is why multi-threading or selling to the buying committee is so important, because you need to know who else just outside of that one person who you originally made contact with should be involved in the deal. And to highlight the importance of it, I'm still managing a sales team, and one of my sales reps just recently, when I was prepping for this event, the main decision maker that we were multi-threading this deal, meaning that we had multiple contacts. We had the decision maker, we had a couple of VPs at the company that we're selling to, but the main decision maker, who was basically our first point of contact, he left the company. So that just sort of highlights why you need to focus on multi-threading, especially when your deal values are larger, because if you only focus on one person and you're only selling to one person, then if that person, for example, leaves the company or gets fired or resigns, or perhaps that person just doesn't see the value in your product, there's a lot of reasons why having that one point of contact can be detrimental to your deal. So if you rely on one person to close your deal, you're only one person away from losing it. This is single threading. Single threading means you're only relying on one person. This is very common, of course, if you're, B2C, like direct to consumer, or you're selling SMB, smaller business, and you're only selling to one person, because sometimes there is only one person to buy, right? If you sell to like a mom and pop shop or whatever, there's only those two people, the family, that makes the decision. But as you have larger organizations that you're selling to, it's important to try and find as many people as you can to bring to that buying committee and to identify them, not just ask anybody and everyone, but to identify them properly. So the reason why single threading doesn't work well in enterprise environments, well, if you have a champion at a company, and for example, there's a report here from Dr. John Sullivan that I pulled off Lucid Chart, 70% of people quit their job within 2 years. So just think about the person who you're speaking to. You have no idea, and this is actually probably a little bit this is probably even more of an issue now that COVID is starting to sort of taper back a little bit. People are switching jobs left, right, and center. So you don't know how long this person's been in their job for. You don't know if they're looking at another job. You don't know if they're going to be there by the end of the buying cycle. If you have a 6-month or year-long sales cycle, there could be a chance that that person could leave. It's a very real possibility. So that's why it's important to focus on finding other people to bring into the deal. And the benefits of multi-threading, well, of course, if you have many people in the prospect's organization and your champion leaves at any stage, well, then even during a sales negotiation, you have other people that you can bring into the fold. You can contact other people, and you're not starting from scratch. That's the other important thing too. So how do you actually apply a multi-threading approach? I'm just speaking through a couple topics here, and then I'm going to actually walk through a deal review of mine, actually, that I use multi-threading. Then I can also sort of speak through some of the ways that you can look at LinkedIn or look at databases or filter to find potential decision influencers that you should include in the deal, so that you have the opportunity to sell to the whole buying committee and not just the one champion or stakeholder. So before you start a deal, before you start prospecting, you're going to identify the stakeholders. You're going to identify the people that should be involved in your deal. And of course, it's industry specific, but if you are running an ABM campaign, an account-based marketing campaign, and you are targeting multiple people at the buying organization, this is not that different. Potentially, if you're running ads against an entire organization, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit less targeted than if you're doing a multi-threading sales approach, but you still are targeting multiple people at one organization. So you have to understand the landscape of the organization. You have to build the relationships with the people that you will eventually be bringing in on demos, not just the champion, but the decision influencers, the executive sponsors for the deal. And as you conduct your outbound, when you start prospecting, you're asking yourself these questions. So who are the decision makers in the company? Who else can influence? Influence is key, major buying decisions. And then of course, the more traditional sales question you should be asking yourself when you're prospecting is, what do they care about the most? Value, cost, et cetera, solving a pain point. What problems do they have? But you're not just looking at it through the lens of that one person, you're looking at it through the lens of multiple people. So a really easy way to understand how to do this when you first start your prospecting efforts against a company. So say you're selling to, I don't know, Salesforce, doesn't matter. You're selling a product to Salesforce. You can actually build a chart of the people that you think would be involved in the deal. And you're not going to have internal information. So some of this is going to be guesswork. But if you do this enough and you understand and you sold this product to similar sized organizations before, you can start to have a very educated guess on who is involved in this deal, the relationships between the different stakeholders, and that will allow you to actually build out and do the research and build out some sort of org chart, because you will know who you want to eventually speak with and communicate with. And you can, of course, be prospecting to all these individuals, or multi-threading doesn't mean that you're just prospecting to all these individuals. What multi-threading means is that, for example, say you prospect, let's choose someone here. Let's say you get in touch with Raven Carlos, who's the director of analytics at this fake company, and say you know that you need the COO involved. You're probably going to have someone on the analytics team, so one of the analytics managers who's going to have to be involved as well. Of course, it helps if you can reach all of them, but also if you cannot reach all of them and you have a discovery call with Raven right here, the other part of multi-threading is educating Raven that Raven is probably going to want to bring in their COO at some point to confirm the deal. You're going to want to bring in someone on the analytics team to speak through some of the problems that they're having. And you're going to educate the first champion, Raven, the buyer, on who else you want to bring in the deal early on, so that those people are brought into the deal as soon as possible, because Raven may not even know who should be involved in making the decision. This could be the first time that he's ever bought something like what you're selling. So it's not just finding and creating the org chart, it's also educating the champion on who should be brought into the deal, so that you increase the chance and the likelihood of that deal closing. You have the opportunity to build relationships with all the people that are adjacent to that deal. And then of course, if you bring those people that are critical to making that decision in early on, you increase the sales velocity, or you increase how quick the deal is going to close. So realistically, if you look at the steps required in multi-threading, it's not so different than if you were just putting together a sales playbook for your org, right? So you have to identify your ideal customer profile. You have to identify your buyer persona, or the people within the company. And I'm going to gloss over some of these terms. I'm not going to go into too much depth, assuming that some people already know like what ICP is, what buyer persona is. But you identify your ideal customer profile, basically the company you want to sell to. You identify your buyer persona, so the people within the company that are going to be the decision makers. You also then take it a step further. You identify the decision influencers. You create an org chart. You then prospect that org chart. When you book a demo, you're doing your homework on basically the company and the people that should be brought into the not just the demo, but then the discovery call rather. In the discovery call, I would say what you should be doing is you should be setting an agenda for what's going to be accomplished in the discovery call. But when I say set an agenda, you're also setting an agenda for other people in the company that should be brought in on your demo call. So you're educating the person that you're speaking to on the discovery call, who else you would eventually like to speak to and who else should be brought in. You're understanding the role of the first customer, or the first person that you're bringing in. So you're understanding that if I'm speaking to Randy, he's a director of analytics, and you understand his place in the company so that you know what you should be talking to him about, versus if you speak to the COO or you speak to an analytics manager. So you have to tailor your demo or your discovery rather to the person you're actually speaking to, that first point of contact, because also the first point of contact, the first person that agrees to a demo may not actually be the person that you need to speak to, which is something else that you have to understand. It's also, a lot of this process is just being more aware of the orgs that you're actually selling to, being more aware of the company that you're selling to, so that you can help guide them to make buying easy for them by bringing in the right people at the right time. After you do that discovery call, you're setting next steps, you're booking a demo. And when you book your demo, hopefully at this point, if you are multi-threading properly, the demo has more than just that first customer or that first person that you jumped in on the discovery call with. Perhaps in the demo, you'd be bringing in the COO, you'd be bringing in the director of operations, you'd be bringing in an analytics manager, you bring in other people. And then you set next steps after the demo. So just regular sales stuff. So you're figuring out what their buying process looks like, how, if they've allocated budget, all the regular sales things. And then after the demo, then you can also engage in another concept called team selling, where if you are an account executive, you can bring in, for example, a sales engineer, you can bring in an executive on your side, you can bring in other people on your team to help support you. And how you combine team selling, aka bringing in your team into the deal, with multi-threading is, if you have identified all the decision influencers on their team, you can match them up with that same level of individual on your team. So you can, for example, say, I know a sales engineer, or I know a CTO should be involved in this demo call or this discovery call. I'm going to bring my sales engineer to speak about some of the technical nuances of the deal. Usually you need executive sign off. So you need to bring in your COO to sign off on purchasing this product. So I'm going to bring in my CFO to speak to them about how you can go about budgeting this in your next fiscal year. So you can match the team that you have and the different skill sets that your team has with decision influencers on the buyer side. So that means that they're speaking at the same level about concerns or problems that they would have, and they're speaking to somebody who's an expert at that problem. So a COO who's trying to figure out how to allocate budget is speaking to a financial executive. They're on the same level. A CTO who's concerned about security or integration or migration of a new software is speaking to it could be your CTO who can mitigate some of those concerns. So that's how you're using multi-threading to bring in multiple decision influencers, along with team selling to bring in people from your side that can speak on that level. So at the end of the sale, at the end of the deal, you could have 4 people speaking to 4 or 5 other people. And at this point, this is what is going to actually solidify the deal. So you've not only brought in more decision influencers and increased your likelihood of closing that deal, mitigated any risk in losing that deal from just dealing with one person, and increased the velocity of closing that deal because you brought people in early on, you're also bringing in executives or support from your own side. So this is more or less what multi-threading is. And I was just going to walk through an actual deal review. How long have I gone for? I've gone for about 15 minutes. Okay, I'll do a quick deal review of how I use this to actually walk you through something that I closed in my career many years ago. And then I'll just show you some of the tools that I use to identify some of the decision influencers if I'm trying to set up a prospecting campaign, or if one of my sales reps is trying to set up a prospecting campaign, how to use different tools to find the not just the decision maker, but the decision influencers. So I closed a deal with Brinks many years ago. first step that I did was to map out all the individuals that could be decision makers in that buying process, to walk you through this map. And these are actually all real people. So what had happened with this deal was I was working for a small company. My CEO had tried to sell this product to Brinks years ago, and it didn't work. He couldn't close the deal, and his contact was only this individual right here, Shazad. So fast forward, when I was hired into the company, basically he asked me to reevaluate like what went wrong and why we didn't close the deal. When I started mapping out all the relationships involved in, or all the people that would be involved or potentially involved in closing this deal, I realized that he had lost the deal because he was only speaking to this one person right here, where in reality, the evaluation team for the product that we were selling was these two people. This person was just the main point of contact, and he was an IT individual, but these were the two individuals. So an executive plus an actual product user were the two individuals that would ultimately influence the final decision. We also had, for example, in that deal, we had a VP level that wanted to review the deal, not really dive into the weeds on it, but review it enough so that she would actually sign off on it. And she had to sign off on it before Siobhan and a branch manager would approve the deal. And then if they approve the deal, then they go forward with the purchase. So long story short, I created this map and I understood who I had to speak to. And I also understood why we lost the deal in the first place. So basically how I actually went about closing this deal, which I eventually closed one. So we had lost the deal years ago. I came in. The initial discovery of the opportunity occurred when I was resegmenting our account base. The owner of the company asked me to reach out to an old contact who had been originally responsible for purchasing telco systems. The owner lost the deal. So after doing research on the contact, it was clear they did not fit our buyer persona, who was normally responsible for making a purchasing decision. I identified by building out that map, the decision makers and the decision influencers. And then I started reaching out to them. So I ran a campaign to decision makers, decision influencers, plus our old contact. And Shazad, the contact who we originally had, responded and he fielded a call. So in the initial outreach, I just set expectations to maintain the relationship. At the onset, I didn't know, there's a whole story behind this, but they had, instead of going with us the first time, they purchased other equipment, but they never actually installed it. So they actually still had this problem to be solved that we could help them solve. And by building that relationship with that main point of contact, although I knew that I was never going to close the deal, I still understood, like, I uncovered the pain point that person had with it was a telco product. I uncovered that pain point. I reinforced the breakup with their existing telco provider, highlighted pain, position, and prescribed a simpler system that basically we were going to implement. But still, I knew that the person I was speaking to wasn't the person that I ultimately had to bring into the deal. So I told Shazad that other decision makers, so if we go back to that map, other decision makers, not the Shazad, but Siobhan, Jonathan, and Luis would have to be involved in this process. And the first time we tried to sell to him, just remember, nobody informed him of that. So he didn't even realize that. I knew that because I did enough research on the company, and I've sold this similar system to similar size organizations in the past. So the first challenge was the fact that our champion, of course, wasn't the main decision maker. So I had to make him comfortable with our solution, but I also had to educate him on the stakeholders in his company that had to be involved in the decision-making process. And this is the actual play-by-play of how it went down. So in the first meeting, I met with Shazad and Siobhan. It was just me and the Brinks team. In the second meeting, I informed them that they had to bring in Louise because she was a VP level. She had to sign off on this deal. So in the second meeting, I reviewed the solution. And I also, in the second meeting, brought in my executive sponsor, the CEO, to speak with their executive, Louise. So I did a little bit of that team selling in the second meeting. The third meeting, and then I sent over a proposal. In the third meeting, it was a review of the proposal. but I still hadn't closed the deal yet. I knew that I had Siobhan, I had Luis. Shazad at this point, our original champion, if you remember, was actually no longer even involved in this discussion. Because he was never really meant to be the main champion. So Siobhan became our champion. Luis was still the VP required, but they still wanted to make sure there was no pain in implementing the solution. So in the fourth meeting, I really doubled down on the team selling concept. We brought in our director of ops, we brought in a project manager, we brought in a solution architect, IT support, and then we had Siobhan, Louise, and Brink's technical team. And that allowed all the technical questions to be answered, all the logistical questions, all the basically the support and the finance and how they can buy it and how they can implement it. Every question, I brought in somebody to answer that question who was an expert in that particular topic. And that allowed them to sort of reduce any sort of friction in purchasing our solution. It basically reduced any sort of stress in purchasing our solution. And of course, at this point, I was actually working with the right people because I educated that first champion, Shazad, on who actually who had to be involved in the deal. And then there was a couple sales, activities, like there was a contract review, technical review, and then user review. Remember, there was every user of the product had to review it as well, which I had educated them in the first couple touch points that all the users had to be involved in the process as well. And that was the final step that we actually had to take to get that user to understand how they were going to use the new product we were selling. And then we closed it because we brought in the users, we brought in my executive sponsorship and my team, and we sort of quashed any sort of concerns that they had by, again, multi-threading. That's really the end goal. And we won the deal. It was a $113K deal with some recurring revenue attached. And I would even say, like, I'll send you over this deck and you can sort of review it in more detail. I kind of skimmed through it a little bit, but the end goal is educate the customer on who has to be involved in the decision-making process. You can only do that if you yourself know who should be involved in the decision-making process, and bring them in as early as possible to help close the deal, expedite the deal, and of course, mitigate the risk of you losing the deal. And then I'll do one more thing for you. Just to make it super simple, I have my LinkedIn, and I have Apollo, which I use for outbound email campaigns here. So if I'm actually trying to say I'm a net new customer, I'm just trying to find who should be involved in this deal. I'm trying to figure out who I should build into that org chart so that I'm prospecting properly. I can go to, I'm just searching for, if I'm searching for people. So like say I want to sell to, who do I want to sell to? Say VP, say I've identified my ideal customer as a MarTech company, and my buyer persona is a VP of marketing, and say I want to sell to, I don't know, let's use Salesforce. So say VP of marketing, and then you're going to look for Salesforce, and I know that I'm selling to North American markets. So say you first find who this person is. So after you find who the person is, so vice president of marketing at Salesforce, that would probably be the first person who I would want to reach out to and include in my org chart. And then I would look for people that are adjacent to that. So I may look for, if I was selling a MarTech solution, I would probably look for senior level IT executives that would want to audit. I would probably also look for potentially a senior level sales executive. And you're just filtering, like at this point, like you're looking for like CTO or SVP. Let's see here, Salesforce CTO. So I would probably reach out to these three people to make sure that I get the right senior level IT director. I could even do like SVP or like engineering. And then I could try and filter by, let me see here. If I look at senior director of engineering, so I'd probably reach out to a couple of these individuals as well. And I'd probably have to know like what type of product that I'm actually selling. But if I'm selling any sort of tech solution, then I know that I would need a senior engineering executive, as well as obviously some decision maker in the marketing department, some decision maker in finance. And I would be reaching out to these people and trying to build an org chart. Now, the more that I've done this, of course, the easier it is to build this org chart. But to put it in perspective, like if you're prospecting a large organization, the research required could take a couple hours. And that's fine, because if you close one of these deals, this is going to be like a multi-million-dollar contract. So you're just going through, you're filtering, and you're finding the people that you want to reach out to, and you're building them into an org chart. And then as you prospect out, you're getting responses back from these people, and they're telling you, oh yes, I work with so-and-so, or no, that's not my department, I don't know who that is. And you're just basically filtering till you have a good idea of who should be involved in this deal. That's why it takes a little bit of time, but you do know you have a marketing executive, probably some sort of engineering or technical executive, plus some sort of financial executive involved in the deal. And I would take it a step further. If you're selling like MarTech for, if you're selling some sort of marketing tech for social, you probably want to have to prospect like social media, like a social media individual, because they're probably going to want to have some say. If you're prospecting MarTech that gives you customer insights and data, you can look for business, like a business, like a BA or something like that, like a business analyst, and you want to probably prospect them because they're also going to be included in the deal. So you're doing the research so that you know who eventually, after prospecting and whittling down who should be involved, this network of individuals that are eventually going to be responsible for basically helping make the decision, influencing the decision to purchase your product. And LinkedIn is one way to do it. Another way you could use, I use Apollo because it's like basically a full database, but same thing goes for here. So you can just filter if you have the profiles or the personas of the people that you want to target, then you're just filtering, you're building lists, you're running campaigns against one senior engineering individual, one marketing individual, one financial individual at the target company. And then you're eventually filtering through that list, and you're building out an org chart of who should actually be involved and who should be brought to the table early on when you're trying to sell that product or service. So that's more or less my little spiel on multi-threading. Let me see if I can go through a couple questions here. Is Apollo integrated with LinkedIn? Yes, it is actually. That's why I use it, to be honest. So I use Apollo as part of LinkedIn. I have a plugin, Apollo. So if I'm filtering in LinkedIn, which is great, then I can search for the person that I want. So say I want to look for an engineering professional at Salesforce. I filtered it down. Now, Salesforce is a little bit of a crazy example because I just picked this out of the blue, and it would take a long time to filter through 10,000 like senior level engineering executives at Salesforce. But of course, if you're prospecting Salesforce, then like this is probably going to be the deal of your lifetime. Like in all seriousness, there's a lot of levels between a company that has 10,000 engineering directors and whatnot. Right now I use, I use, and just to finish up that Apollo integration question. So if you search for a job title or role in LinkedIn, of course, you have all your responses here. You can connect with them. You can reach out to them. You can run connection and message campaigns if you use a tool like WeConnect, for example. But if you want to put them into an email sequence, Apollo in particular has its own database, but you can also just select that person. You can click save selected. You can email them, you can add them to sequence. And when you install Apollo, it'll give you a Chrome extension that will sort of augment your LinkedIn setup. So I can call them right from LinkedIn. I can email them right from LinkedIn. I can put them into a sequence that I've already set up in Apollo. So I can do a lot. I can do a lot right from LinkedIn. That's why I love it so much, because I can easily pull lists from LinkedIn, prospect them on LinkedIn, and simultaneously throw them into email campaigns in Apollo. So there's a lot of tools that do what Apollo does. I find it very easy. CRM, I've used every CRM under the sun. Right now I use HubSpot, but you could also use Salesforce. If I'm not mistaken, Apollo has integrations with almost everything. I can even probably see it right now. Um, there's there's one part of it that has like a list of like CRM integrations, but almost every major CRM it will integrate into. And I'm not affiliated with Apollo in any way, but I just find it very easy. But I use HubSpot right now for no particular reason other than the company that I worked for was using HubSpot. But they all work. Oh, there it is, integration. So HubSpot, Salesforce, it integrates with SendGrid, Outreach, SalesLoft. And then, of course, if you need anything else, you got Zapier. I think that's any other questions about multi-threading? Any other questions about I think the concept makes sense. I think a lot of it is just knowing that it's an important thing to do. The concept of reaching out to many people in the company that you're buying from or selling to rather, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's just about, instead of jumping into a company, maybe take a little bit extra time to do the research, to do the homework, to build out that map and that org chart. And then that will help you in the long run. And the biggest thing I can say is don't expect the company that you're selling to know who they should bring to the table. Don't expect the company that you're selling to know who else should be involved in the deal, because they don't always know. Like when I'll use my example to sort of highlight that point. When my CEO first tried to sell to Shahzad didn't know that other people should be involved. No fault of his. He just didn't think that it was required. He thought that, well, after I make a decision on the product that I want to buy, then I'm going to just let everyone else know that we should buy this and they're going to agree with me. Well, the reason why we lost the deal was because while he was doing this and not telling anyone that he was talking to my CEO, I don't know who was at the time, but someone else was looking into buying another product from another company and no one was communicating. So that alone can eliminate some of the guesswork. If, for example, in that first meeting, I spoke to Shahzad, I said, hey, you have to bring in like these 5 other people. Well, now at least those people even know that Shahzad is looking into a solution. Because I think the first time we lost it, I can't verify this, but I'm pretty sure it's just because somebody else, probably in Shahzad's department, probably somebody that sat like 10 feet away from him, was also looking into a solution. And they just ended up both presenting at the same time and nobody else had any context. So they just so they just picked the second person's solution. So it's about educating them that they have to bring people in. And then, of course, selfishly for you, it's going to help you close the deal a little bit easier. So I hope that provide some context on multi-threading and why it's important. And I'll send this deck and you can sort of review the deal and some of the points that I put out. But that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's very impressive, and special thanks for the numbers you put, like the deal size and the deal cycle and everything. I really appreciate that, because
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, like this openness. It's completely awesome.